earlier session, because I think this session is going to be very different than what we had shared earlier. We look at, earlier sessions, we look at a lot of the best practices and the technologies to get, the data integrity or the data management in order to have, a better analytics. But one thing that we find it very important when it comes to analytics is human and people. We talked about how important it is, the human brain in the earlier session, how important, human will never be replaced. And in this session, we want to talk about how important it is to have a diversified, more equity and inclusion of technical data analytic teams. So we'll be talking a lot about DEI and having DEI in your data analytic teams today. And we have a great panel of speakers to share with us. But before I do introduction, just a few housekeeping notes. First, I'd like to invite everyone to ask questions and take the brain of all our speakers by asking a question using the Q&A button. So there is a Q&A button. Use that one instead of the chat box, so we could keep track of all the questions and make sure your questions are all being answered. And to encourage everyone to share your questions and share your views, I think we'll also be giving out coffee vouchers. I believe the first 3 questions or the person that asked the questions will walk away with a voucher at the end of the session. So welcome everyone to, posing your questions. So without further delay, let me introduce our panel of speakers here today. First, I'd like to invite Mr. Dr. Lau, Dr. Lau Chern-Han. He is the CEO of LEAD. He's also a data scientist, a trained data scientist as well. And second, we have also a group of practitioners that are data scientists. Chloe Lee, she is the APAC IT business partner, data science lead from Johnson Controls, a company that provides intelligence to buildings, and as a practitioner in bringing data scientists and as a female data scientist as well. And then other data scientists, a female data scientist, which come more from the technology provider perspective, which is Renee Lowe. She's the general manager, data and AI from Microsoft. And last but not least, we also have Annie Matthew. She's the director of developer relationships with Microsoft APAC. First, I'd like to welcome all the panelists joining us today. Welcome. If you could, maybe you could start to unmute, then we'll make sure we can hear you later, as I'm going to ask you the first question now. Because we talked a lot so much about, all the best practices in technology in using, in getting the data integrity and managing all the data. This, as we talked about, this session is mainly talk about the team, the data analytic team. How important is DEI for having in the data analytic team, and especially for the industries? Maybe I'll just throw this to anyone on the panel. Maybe you could talk a little bit also about what's your involvement in bringing some DEI diversity into the industry as well. Dr. Lau, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. I think DEI is very important. Now, I'm sharing my experience from both working, training, and mentoring a lot of startups. And we can see that, when we talk about DEI, a lot of people, the first thing that would you go into your mind is about those things like, let's say, LGBT or something that also are the minorities. And I always advise or tell the founders and our students is that the reason why you don't feel comfortable when you're working with somebody is because you are not familiar with them. Because it could be because of your culture, it could be because of the tools that you use. And I think most of us here, we can relate. We always have those things like Python is better, R is better, that sort of things. But that when you work in a successful projects, one of the key criteria is it doesn't matter what tools you use as long as you know what to do with that. So of course, later on we can go in further and discuss about this, but I think I would like to start with embracing it. So the first thing that we need to learn is how to recognize it. Okay, this is not just about a particular type of people that you are working with, but if you are only working with a specific or very small niche of people, you will lose all the varieties and all the fun working with other people.
Yes, definitely very important, having fun as well and getting a diversity, I guess, in the team. Maybe I'll, for the practitioner, Chloe and Renee would like to share a little bit, how important it is for having DEI in your team, and what have you been, been doing to bring that into reality.
Yeah, I think I can start. I love that, Dr. Lau, you started off with fun because it's not just a HR checkbox of any sort, right? I think DEI is especially important when it comes to the data and AI space, because especially when we use AI models to create recommendations and whatnots, we need to represent the demographics of the world, right? And so it is even more important to have diverse teams so that we can see around the corners, we can understand the features that we actually need to include, and we don't have groupthink, or else what happens is the models that are created may be skewed to the point that we actually leave certain whole groups out of the consideration set and ultimately underserve a certain part of the world itself.
Yeah, definitely important to make sure it's being representative to the real world. Chloe, would you like to also share from your experience how important it is DEI in your project or in your team?
Yeah, sure. I think on top of what Dr. Lau and Renee have shared, I think one important aspect is that we have to recognize how important data is to unbiased analytics. How do we know that the data is unbiased? We ourselves need to be the judge. And so this brings back to the question, why should we care about diversity and inclusion? I think if we don't be mindful about diversity inclusion when building a team or developing an algorithm, we won't have unbiased collection, selection, let alone usage of data in the first place from the start of the data value chain.
Great. Yeah, I think you all mentioned a really good point about being representing to the real world, but we all know that in the real world, human are biased, and sometimes business do operate in a biased mode in the sense that every business or every product would have some kind of like target audience, target customers as well. So they will create, or personalization that create things that is, biased to that group, or, personalized or customized to the group. So I think my question would be, how important or how bad could it be, when we don't have the EI in the team? Wouldn't that be just, a representative to the real world of, we are actually biased? And I think we also talked a little bit about, responsible AI earlier as well. And how does, that play a role in probably responsible AI? Does anyone want to give that a crack?
Yeah, Sheila, if I can start us off here, right? I think when we look at AI models learn from data sets. And usually data sets are a representation of the past. And I think we can all agree that our past is not perfect, right? And if there's no intervention, it also means that we are allowing our past to define our future. Let me give you an example, right? Ernst & Young created a fair learn platform that basically assesses the model's fairness by looking at its performance across different demographics. And one thing that is really important is in our lives, many of us go to the bank to purchase houses or cars or for schooling or whatnot. And when a bank grants or denies a loan, the reasons have to be appropriate, they have to be fair, they have to be defensible. But what happens when a computer plays that role, right? And when EY actually used a Fair Learn platform to test, mortgage adjudication data, looking at transaction data, payment history, and other typical data that is flows into decisions around mortgages, it found that the disparity in terms of the granting or not of loans between men and female was about 7%. Right. And all other factors being the same, because historically fewer women took out loans as head of households, starting businesses or whatnot. And so, with intervention, that gap was closed to 0.5%. But I know numbers are just numbers, right? I would rather just have the conversation of What if you were that 0.5% and you had a life event that depended on that result, right? This very materially impacts your future. And so I think it's incredibly important for us to build this better future together, right? And diversity is a key piece to understanding some of the features that need to be included to take the fairness out of the system itself, because we shouldn't let the past define our future.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think, like we can't let the history, what had happened before, define what's going on in the future. Chloe and Dr. Lau, is there any, you'd like to share as well, how bad could it be, when we don't have DEI in the team or any team?
I think bias is a terrible thing, and I always say, right, there's no good or bad technologies. They just amplify everything. So if these technologies give you 10 times, 10x, 100x of the benefits, and whatever disadvantages or the weakness will be amplified 10 times, 100 times as well. And bias is very common in our decision-making process because humans are lazy, and we have all those things like confirmation bias, selection bias, and things like that. And like, I always say that if you interview people who play Russian roulette and survive, and they will tell you that, it's a fun game and it's pretty safe to play. And that's a typical classic survival bias kind of situation. And if that is put into the process of AI, what happened is that we automate everything, right? We let AI make the decisions, they crawl the data, they clean the data and build the models. And if there's no process, especially a human process or some safeguard measures to take over that when things happen, then it will give us a lot of troubles in development and management. Like in HR automation, it will just say, 70% of our applicants are guys for these positions, or 80% of the other positions are all female. So, and that will become a rule in our AI systems. And the downside, I think, is very hard to measure, but it could be really bad.
Yeah, I strongly agree with Renee and Dr. Lau, what they said about the bias. Yes, it is a reality, but we don't simply accept it. And instead, we should treat this as an opportunity for improvement. So in terms of how would diversity, brings the good and bad in the team, so I can share some of my personal experiences. One thing is that I noticed when we have a diverse team, people would be more focused on the common ground, accept each other's differences, and embrace or more glued together. And versus when you have a team that is more homogeneous, the culture is actually not as vibrant. So I would say diversity definitely brings a better dynamic within the team, and that definitely has a positive impact on the quality of work, and that includes the accuracy of the models. And also, I would like to add that if we go without diversity, we could potentially find ourselves in a vicious circle where if we think about the end of the value chain of data, when we make decisions based on data and analytics, the underrepresentation of, for example, women could further increase the risk that we make policies that would further harm the interest of the minorities.
Yeah, I think you guys really mentioned something really interesting about, when it is not being reflected, then the problem will actually amplify through AI and through the analytics. And it is really important to start off being really accurate and proactively look for that accuracy, I guess, in order to bring a more responsible AI and analytics. We've been listening to some of our panelists earlier, so I'd like to also, listen from the audience here. So I'd like to share a live poll, raise a live poll right now, because we talked a little bit about, why it is important, but it is still not very much diversified analytic teams probably in a lot of organizations. So we want to look at some of the challenges and what are your challenges, because we do have a lot of digital leaders here. So it'd be great, we could also hear from you guys. What do you see are the major challenges when it comes to driving DEI in your team? Would that be something along the line about talent shortage? Or is it something that is just, more HR issue, probably not the digital leaders issue? There could be issues about like, it is not a direct benefit to the business. So it's not quite a priority. It's obviously not urgent. The company won't die the next day if we don't have a DEI team, or, that's not even, a priority within the executives. The board never asked about it. So, doesn't need to be addressed. You could pick any that apply. We'll come back to that answer later. So we'll give you some time to look at the questions and the answer. And I think one of the audience delegates, Benjamin, asked a really good question as well about, challenges relating to, investment or cost, or, even to train and certify data scientists. We'll get into that because after we go through all the challenges, we'll get into that question as well. But while we give everyone some time to go through that live poll, I'd like to drill into another question that is more specific, maybe to our Asian digital leaders audience here. I think Chloe and Renee both mentioned something along the line about, gender gap in general, our business landscape. I think that probably more relevant for Asia as well, because we are in Asia, we do have a very dynamic market from, different languages, different currency, different culture, religion, or, in this region. But I think one, common issue, it seems to be the issue of gender gap. And a lot of the time it is tied to issue like traditions or religion. Maybe my question will be more like for the panelists. How do you see that gap, particularly in gender gap, has created, problem in business for the business and sometimes, in analytics? I think Renee mentioned a little bit about, addressing the loan, but from maybe Dr. Lau, would you like to share a little bit, because you've been a data scientist yourself and also been training. So how has the gender gap issue, have you observed that as well? Maybe a lot less.
I've been looking for a keyword in my head, and I'm glad that Chloe mentioned about underrepresentation. So in fact, I think women are more suitable to become a data scientist than guys, because people like me, a typical nerd/geek, come from a software engineering background. Everything inside our head are all logic, 0 and 1s. But in business, and especially in the era of AI, we need to be more human. You need more empathy. You need to be able to listen to what your clients are saying, really sit down and understand their business problems and help them with the solutions. And especially Sheila talks about in Asia, 80-90% of the companies are SMEs, and they don't really need, things like Hadoop, big data, that sort of solution. They will get there eventually. I don't know how long it will take them, but before that, they need to really sit down, get some dashboards, collect some data, and really understand how to streamline the workflow. Then we have something to optimize at least. And this is where I think female does a much better job than guys. And this sort of diversity, these sort of gaps, we can see that when I was running the training. So we don't have like a huge gaps. The ratio between male and female students is always about 50, 55, 45. So it's a pretty healthy sign. And go back to my keyword here, underrepresentations. I just wish that a lot of people, they just because of the culture, right? They think that ladies shouldn't speak up so often. But at least I'm glad to see that if there's any platform like hackathons or talks like this, please speak up and then just show yourself. Just be there and support. And I think things are getting better.
Great. Yeah, I think you're pretty right about how important it's probably start from also the training side as well. Yeah. Getting more data scientists, basically just getting more data scientists and bring that representative to the real world. We've looked into the survey earlier, so let's we've done the live poll earlier, so let's look into the results. I think a lot of people have done their poll, and looks like the talent shortage is like
I'm not surprised.
The biggest challenge. I think it is, it seems to make sense to me, right? Like beggars can't be choosers when you can't even get enough. How do you, bring that, DEI into and to the team. I think another one that's about, there's no direct benefit. It's difficult to show any business revenue. Maybe I'll throw this question, this observation back to the panelists. What do you guys think, in terms of what you see or what you experience versus, what the audience has been telling us?
Yeah, let me hit on that one. So first of all, from a talent shortage perspective, I think we'll all be super excited to hear from Annie later on how she's doing some really good work in that space to address talent shortage. Just a couple things to call out, both in talent shortage and the direct benefit. From a talent shortage perspective, I myself have built AI teams as well, right? And it's real, right? Not only are real data scientists very expensive, they're very hard to find, and then the domain expertise can sometimes be rare. One thing that I have tried where, if you really feel that you've exhausted the local networks, is I have brought in foreign talent, but the foreign talent then helps ramp up a local team, right? Because we spoke earlier about the lack of diversity, and it's not just in gender, it's also in culture, right? So many times you bring in foreign talent, while they may be super skilled from a kind of data science perspective, they may not be understanding of all the different cultural pieces that will be unique to Asia. You take, for example, in Asia, we have a huge underbanked population, about, I think, over 490 million. We also know that of the underbanked, there's 60% female, right? And from my previous example, I think a lot of you know that I spend a lot of time working with our banking industry, where we're building lots of models around how to better serve these customers. But these customers, underbanked, unbanked, are not in the banking system at all, right? And so if you bring in default talent from a developed world that only thinks about full penetration of banking to everyone, we will actually underserve a large population within Asia itself. And there's a lot of creativity that's needed to say, well, if you don't have a bank account, you probably have a phone, right? How do we work across industries with the telcos to better represent these specific minorities? Because like Dr. Lau said, technology is a tool, right? And the tool provides a value, and it's not inherently good or bad. But when the tool itself is not available to a group because they are not represented within the data set, that's something where inclusion in terms of building out the model becomes incredibly, incredibly important. From a direct benefit perspective, I think we've all heard of the examples of many, many chatbots that have gone wild, right? And literally chatbots gone wild is probably a term, right? If it isn't, it should be. And, when you look back at Asia, I don't know how many folks in our audience have heard of Lee Luda. I hope that you have not, because it's a horrible example in South Korea where a chatbot was released in, I think, December. It was launched for 20 days, downloaded 2.7 million times in Korea and Japan, and was basically, like Chloe said, had a vicious cycle. And then it just started spewing hate speech against women, minority, different races. In 20 days, that whole thing was shut down, right? Completely shut down. That's a business impact, right? Imagine all the work that went into driving it. We have to make sure that there are some controls in place. And I think a lot of the organizations that we look at have committees around responsible AI, around how it's used, around how we're driving fairness in the data sets itself. We have a long way to go, right? But definitely, I hear you in terms of the issues you called out here.
Yeah, I think it's really important that, probably the direct benefit is not as people probably don't realize or don't understand. Sometimes it doesn't show until problems happen that, and you've already put in so much investment and the team into it, and then the product didn't work. At that time, it's more like it's not bringing the ROI back as well. So that becomes not just the benefit itself, but an issue. It becomes a really big problem. I think, these are really common problems, but then let's look at the solution in that case. Are there anything that we could do to solve this in that case? Like talent's definitely an issue, but from the practitioner here and also, trainers like Dr. Lau, what do you see? What do you think digital leaders could do? Obviously, no one chooses it is an HR issue. They all think it is, their role as well, or part of their role to build DEI in the team. But what are the roles that digital leaders could do?
Okay, first thing first, I would like to clarify something that talent shortage is everywhere, not just in our industry, all right? So if you go to an F&B conference, they will tell you the same, we don't have enough head chefs, we cannot find good cook. And then you go to a digital marketing forum, they'll say, well, we can't find good high quality copywriters. So it's 80-20 rules basically. And that's why they are talents, right? They are rare, they are unicorns. And come back to our industry, especially data science and AI, like I say, when we run the training, we intentionally add in some different elements, like for example, we don't let random or AI does all the job. Let's say when you form a team to do group presentations inside the company as well, you don't just let people pick their own teammates, so to speak, right? Because they will pick. When I was in uni, I'll pick like, okay, I'm Asian, and then I'll look for Asians because the culture is the same. Again, we are lazy. We want to reduce problems, so we try to maximize the similarity and then minimize the differences. So we intentionally include that sort of elements in group forming, in team formations or team building activities, so that people get to work with different people. And once they are used to work with different people, they will understand that working with others are just like working with different people. You need to embrace their differences and you need to understand them. And go back to other parts of things that I have observed, that companies that have failed when they run data science team, for example, they made this mistake by getting somebody who is very strong in technical to lead the team. So they have their own ego. It's like, especially for the past few years, people has been putting data scientists like, you are the unicorn, sexiest job in 21st century, and they don't listen to others and they don't care about other people's feeling. And that makes it very difficult to grow a successful data team, because like I say, data science is unique. You need programming, you need mathematics and statistics, and you need business people as well. So there are not that many technical jobs that require this amount of business skills and technical skills, or hard skills and soft skills, to blend together to deliver a successful project. So I think if there's anything that I will share, this is something that everybody should remember and bear in mind.
I think this is also a good time to address one of the questions from the audience about challenges when it comes to like investments and costs, or even to train and certify data scientists. Does anyone like to share a little bit, like how maybe could solve this, when it comes to there's probably investment and costs involved?
I'd like to comment on the talent shortage, and also maybe briefly on the Q&A section. So I also feel strongly about the talent shortage is a reality and we all face it. So when we have a vacancy, we often try to fill the position as soon as possible. But I think there is something very straightforward that we can do to help this situation. Since we already know that there is a shortage, we can plan ahead and anticipate the need from specific domains, for example, in data science, and start to nurture a pipeline of talents. So I want to share, something that Johnson Controls is doing. Is that we are starting internship programs and traineeship in, for example, data science to really, to train them beforehand so that we have talent when we need it. And also in the same time, we try to keep the intern pool or traineeship pool very diverse. So when we think about, in a way, we're also thinking about diversity and inclusion beforehand.
Yeah, I think that proactiveness and build that pipeline of data scientists, that's important. I also like to also address another question. I think it's about AI governance. Probably maybe, our panelists here like to share a little bit, how important it is. Maybe DEI can help for AI governance. I think, a lot of some of the regulatory authorities has been putting a lot of best practices or methodology in terms of fairness and on AI governance. How does DEI and the team play a role in maybe meeting those or, in helping in AI governance?
Yeah, so at Microsoft, we have a responsible AI framework that is not just a kind of PowerPoint slide. It's a lot about, like, from an operations of an organization perspective, what do you need to put in place to ensure that whatever models you release are responsible, right? And there's very key points around this council being very diverse, because you need them to look around all the different corners before this model is released to say, hey, have we considered X, Y, and Z? And the more diversity you have on that panel, it's like the more corners you are able to look around. Now, at Microsoft, we also have this group, right? And it's very important. I think what is even more important than that is, on one hand, we talked about the difficulty of finding talent and the difficulty of hiring talent. But I think beyond that, after the individual is hired into an organization, all of us are, as individuals, are responsible for helping that individual be included and have a voice. And having a voice is also different from being heard, right? Because I find many times those from minority groups are a little bit more soft-spoken because they are used to being talked down to at times, right? A horrible thing, but it's true. And therefore, those of us around, not only is it important to bring them into the company, but to help them create space for their voice to be heard and actions to be taken, and just treat the feedback with respect, even though at times from different backgrounds, we may not truly understand the full context behind it.
Great. And I think that probably brought us to a good platform to talk about code without barriers. I understand, Annie probably have something to share with us about, some of the Microsoft initiatives in bringing that, or helping organizations to bring DEI in the analytics team. Annie, maybe I'll pass the virtual stage to you, and you could share a little bit more about what digital leaders can do and how code without barriers has been helping them.
Thank you, Sheila. And it was very interesting to listen to the panel discussion and the questions. So very quick to present Code Without Barriers. As we hit upon the pandemic, we came upon 3 themes, and they were converging at a point where Code Without Barriers became essential. Let me get into the themes now. The first one was the higher job loss rates for women. So as much as men were losing jobs, 1.8x higher number of women were losing jobs. Now, if you look at it from the cloud data and AI perspective, women representation in digital cloud is just 12%. Now in data and AI, we see 26%, but these are more at the data analytics stage, so not at the more impactful roles in data science and AI and things like that. The World Economic Forum brought out its Global Gender Report in 2020, and one of the key things that came out of that was when a nation was looking at closing that economic gender gap, the biggest thing was about underrepresentation of women, but not just a general underrepresentation, but in emerging roles in technology. So that was one of the first themes that came through. And the second one really was emerging technologies like AI and what it meant for AI to have diversity or not have diversity. The point that AI is different, and like say metaverse and other technologies like that are going to be way different, because the pace of innovation and the proximity to human intelligence or the human experience is going to impact us all at a personal and societal level. Renee talked about one example of insurance, and think about so many other, and I saw one question on healthcare. So here's something from the Alan Turing Institute, very recent report. They were looking at how was data and science and AI in the age of COVID-19. What were the good things? What were the challenges? The good thing, obviously, was that a lot of innovation came from the community level. Awesome, because AI has become more democratized. People were able to use it. But apart from data itself being a problem, the third big issue was inequality and exclusion of data science and AI. Say, if I was a minority in Malaysia, which I am, I would get the COVID vaccination a lot later than somebody else. So think of all the minority underrepresented. It could be women, it could be the rural areas. There are many ways to look at it. But just because data and AI systems were having algorithms which had bias baked in, this was translating to real life experience, that I get a vaccination later, you get a school admission or not for your child, an insurance or not, I get a housing or not. All of this is becoming super important. Apart from that, other areas, now I saw the poll result, and benefits to business benefits were lower. So one of the things is looking at the products and services we were putting out, or our partners or our customers were putting out. The issue that, say, for example, Fitbit was being used a lot in healthcare, wellness for a long time. And research showed that Fitbit does not have the same level of signals for men versus women, for white Caucasian men versus Asian, things like that. And obviously, underpinning one big one, which I care about a lot, is just the core women and pain disparities. So the doctors in real life, the male doctors, and this is based on research, women have to go to the doctor 7 times to get a serious pain medication, whereas men get it at the first or second. It's just a mental bias that maybe the women talking about pain is something emotional, something psychological. So they cover a lot of different screening before they admit to the woman being in pain and giving pain medication. So imagine your products and services, who it is reaching out to, who are your consumers? And if we are targeting 1 billion consumers out there, and 50% of that is women, do we have that women representation? So this theme emerged very strongly. We work with a lot of developer communities. So that's where we picked up that last theme, which connected to job loss as well, where if you look at Belly Tambunan, he's a leader for data engineering Indonesia, 5,733 members in that community. He's also a CTO. And when we discussed it, he said, oh, we don't have any women in the community. And then his question was, but where are the women? We are there, it's an open community. Why are they not participating? So switch to the point of view from the woman who says, there are hesitations, challenges. It's hard to break into a traditionally male-oriented industry. And this has got a lot of real conversations behind it, where even in a chat, women find just the culture of conversation not acceptable from a female perspective. So they drop off. So those are some of the challenges that women face in developer communities. So when we spoke to community leaders, and we work with 67 communities, there are over 500,000 developers across there. A lot of them are data science and AI communities, less than 10% diversity on average across the board. As we spoke to the women in tech community leaders, they said, we've been doing a lot of work. We're trying to do this, but we're not able to move the needle. And they handed the baton back to us saying, it requires resources. It requires someone who can bring various elements of the ecosystem together to really move the needle on this. And that's how actually Code Without Barriers was born. We took that seriously, and then we had 3 tenets. First is that innovation, entrepreneurs, creators, developers need to reflect society. The second is we aim to help close this gender gap in cloud, data, AI, and digital technology sectors. So we picked the sectors that are going to be impactful. And the last one was to provide a platform for female developers on one side, and organizations like you and us, and communities on the other side, and bring this together to build a more inclusive economic growth for the country. So the mission literally is that break barriers through developer diversity for an inclusive national digital agenda. So you see, we've uplifted it from a developer right up to a national digital agenda, because that is where countries care about, much as organizations do as well. So there are 3 work streams in this, a central being about inspiring and skilling female talent. The second one is about the developers today skill and grow in communities. So the earlier question about how much should we invest, if you open opportunity, maybe not much, women will grab it. So the key is opportunity opening up. So that happens in communities. So work with communities to build 30% diversity within the community so they can go mainstream, get nurtured, discover opportunities. And the last one, the one you see on the right, is really about how do we bring that diversity of opinion to inform decision making in governments, in organizations, in partners. And for that, we are creating a coalition within the country of customers, partners, organizations like yours and us to actually unlock opportunities for the women. So yes, so it's clear the program charter is about driving advocacy, awareness, thought leadership. It's about access to opportunities, creating that pool of women who are skilled, and increasing employability or entrepreneurship. So we launched this in September 21 to an amazing 1.3 million audience. So that just said how much this was a core topic for people. We had 13 customers who signed MOUs with us, and that's about 17 now. We had 21 open source communities partnering, it's 31 now. And we increased 49% increase in AI share of voice. So, so this is actually a village that came together, and I have these logos out here. These are the big ones who are partnering with us. Now the invitation to commit to all of you to come join Code Without Barriers. And there are 6 pillars under which we commit to work together. First is internal diversity, and that's core to how do you skill your own people. Interesting point here is Petronas is a partner, and the way they are doing it is they've committed to 30% women in data and AI teams. So they took the analytics team, women in analytics, and they are actually giving them data apprenticeships, working with us for the skilling part, and bringing them as a pipeline for their data science teams. And there are so many other examples like that. Universities have committed to 30% women computer science students to be certified in data and AI. That's your pipeline. So from Code Without Barriers, you can find that talent. So come join us, be mentors, advocate, join in the hackathons. Dr. Lau was talking about this. That's where you're going to find the talent, open up jobs and internships, and of course, co-brand and take it to the next level. So, yep, I just want to share this. You can reach us at Renee's here, I'm here, reach to us directly, or you can write to reachcwb@microsoft.com. So, yeah, this is an invitation for all of you to join the journey. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Annie, for sharing about the Code Without Barriers. And it sounds like, having community is so important, because a lot of digital leaders, they're already fighting a lot of battles within the organization, trying to get resources. And it's great to have, I guess, a community that helps. But can you share a little bit more with us, some of maybe some concrete improvements you've seen or achievement you have seen that organizations taking part with a community like that can help in bringing, what we talk about, like responsible AI or better accuracy when it comes to analytics?
Right. So one of the things that we have seen from the community is that women have raised their hands after they go through that initial skilling. Their confidence is raised. So they're going within their own organizations and raising their hands and saying that, hey, I want to be part of this AI project or the data science projects. I remember one from Siemens who was on the project management side, had no coding experience, who came on, got certified in 5 days. So it doesn't take long to get certified on the basic fundamental side, enough for you to get an access to that opportunity and then learn on the go. And customers like, say, MetLife or GBDI, that is Big Data Institute Thailand, or Petronas, Also, Prudential and Axiata are now talking to us about how to do this, but all of them have this. So their first step is to look back inward and see where do we need that diversity, and then put a number to that diversity, target, and then work towards it. So one thing is very clear, it's all types of diversity, but unless we have a goal and a focused approach to that one particular type of diversity, we are not going to move the needle. So Code Without Barriers is literally to help move the needle on gender diversity. But of course, similar programs could be applied for others as well.
Yeah, I think diversity is the key word. It could be gender, it could be also different issues. I think one of the audience actually asked an interesting question. I think it's a good time to also raise that, because we talked a little bit about bringing that dynamic team, that DEI in the team, but as technical leaders, sometimes his question is like, how do you get them to work together? Different people can work together better, because I think Chloe mentioned something about how they focus in more common grounds instead of and bringing more vibrant dynamic. But sometimes they could be from so different backgrounds. Like, how do you bring that differences together? Does anyone like to try answer this question?
Yeah, I think you got to look at, are you trying to get a good result quickly, or are you trying to get the best result in the long term, right? Some of the most enduring relationships that I have, working relationships, are basically with those that are most different from me, right? Because there's an immense amount that I learn from those individuals and vice versa, and we continue to build and respect each other. I think Dr. Lau mentioned it earlier in the talk, where as groups mix, right? He's like, no, you got to pick the groups, right? And in the same way, I do that within my organization, where when it's group project time, it's not that everyone's not adults and you can't make your own teams, but I will proactively mix the groups, because one thing that we have to be very careful about is, we finally are able to hire, for example, a set of women within the group. If you put them all in one group, that's also groupthink, right? Like, that's not necessarily any better. So you have to actively mix the diversity of thought so that we ultimately have the right long-term answer as to a short-term answer that may have its disadvantages and blind spots.
Yeah, proactively mixing, and I guess the leader is the person that's being the bridge, right, with all the differences, and being there to integrate them and get them to work together. That's when the leader's quality comes in, I guess. I think another question that I like to address is about the importance of community. I think Annie mentioned a lot more about getting different parties involved, organizations should put in a lot of logos. I think one of the audience was also asking about, collaboration with government, schools, universities. Maybe we'd like to share a little bit how important it is to have a community that is probably not only within the organization, but, as an industry itself. Maybe from a practitioner point of view, Chloe, as well, how do you see that might help, having that community?
Yeah, I definitely think that a community provides a very good support systems. I think everyone needs support. So it's easier to find support, our peers in similar situations, and provide encouragement and help to each other. And also it's a lot easier to find mentorship in a community. Sheila and the QA, since you mentioned about support of community outside the company, I can provide the example of us working with a government program. It's called a mid-career program, where during COVID, some people, unfortunately, they lost their lives, lost their jobs, sorry, and they're forced to maybe take on the switch in their career. So we work with this program and provide a traineeship opportunity to bring these guys forward. For example, I personally held a hackathon for a group of mid-career switchers, and it's a very diverse group. And in these days, in internet or companies like Shopee, Grab, you mostly see young people, right? It's very rare that you see a hackathon that consists of people's age range from 40 to 60. And after the hackathon, I think they have a chance of trying what is machine learning, what is AI, and they can walk into, an interview or apply a job more confidently and talks about data and analytics.
Yeah, I guess that's important, right? Like help you bring that pipeline, not only within your hiring new ones, but also reskilling other business domain knowledge to be also data scientists. Dr. Lau, we'd like to share a little bit as well, because I guess you do both roles, right? You're both data scientists. You run, I think you run the Corona tracker software, and at the same time, you're also training a lot of data scientists. How does that community helps you see, playing in both areas?
As we can see, right, most people have noticed that education, or in particular training programs, is commoditized. It has become a commodity, and we have a lot of beautiful, wonderful platforms like Coursera, Udemy, and even you go to Microsoft sites, there are a lot of training program certification tracks there. So it's not so much about, I think we have successfully make it available and make it accessible to the public to get information that people need. But the completion rate of those programs are very bad. If you look at the stats, right, Coursera completion rate is about less than 10% on average. And then in the best case scenario, if you have 14% of completion, then it'll be a huge achievement to the instructor. So the problem behind is that then we put in a lot of time to investigate and study that is about the support and the community that they lack of. So especially in technical programs, when you face, you miss a semicolon, you don't know what to do, you ask a question, the instructor does not get back to you immediately. But if you ask your friends, right, who've been there, done that, and they can reply to you immediately, oh, I have the same problem the other day as well. So this is where community and support comes in. And like I said in the chat, right, my kids or myself, we go to school not because of the teachers, not because of the school, not because of I like to sit there and read the books, textbooks. It's because of the friends. It's because of the atmosphere. So and the same goes to work environment. We spend at least 8 hours with our colleagues and our peers in our office, right? So if there's nothing that can replace that and make that a better place, a stronger bond and support system, I don't know what is. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I'm a bit aware of time, so probably post the last question just as to wrap up, today's discussion. We talked a lot about what's the challenges, what digital leaders could do, but as we can see, it is still very difficult to reshuffle the mix right away. We talked a lot about how reskilling it. Maybe the last question is about what's your advice to our digital leaders here, and what's a good place to start to bring DEI and to avoid unconscious bias, basically. At the meantime, when they probably can't just change their team right away, and what would be a good place to start, and what they could do right now at the meantime before they could hire and bring a more like DEI team.
Maybe I'll leave us with just 3 quick points, right? The first is it's a continuous journey, right? And so I'm always having conversations, whether I have a role posted or not, right? Because we know that finding the right candidate is extremely important to their success and the representation of women in the workforce. I think the second thing is the term of a diversity hire, like please do not hire someone because of their gender, right? Like hire someone because they are the right person for the role. Invest in the person after they are in the organization, in their continued education, and making sure their voice is heard. And there's a lot of good intention out there, right? From becoming allies. But before you can act, many times first listen, right? Create a safe environment to listen to what some of the concerns are so that you can truly empathize. And at that point, when you take action, it will be the right action. Or else I have seen a lot of great, perfect intent, but completely shot in the opposite direction because it doesn't come from a first place of understanding. And so it's a journey. The fact that everyone is in this panel and in the audience means that this is important to you. And that is very encouraging to me. I would say, let's take this together, but take it from a human perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. You don't want to go too far and create even more hostile environment of, just steering towards like the minority in a sense. You just want to keep it more, representative, and DEI, as I said, like the equity is probably more the key words. Chloe and Dr. Lau, would you like to?
On top of what Renee has said, I strongly echo with Renee. And I think one more point is, I think driving diversity is really about creating a culture. So it's about bringing different people together. So I think as leaders, we have the responsibility to engage within the company, all the different functions, engage external companies, organizations. So we all recognize this goal and achieve this together.
And Dr. Lau, you'd like to?
Sure. So as usual, I think this is a wonderful platform, right? I always love panel discussion like this. But my biggest dream is that one day we don't need a platform like this, because DEI is not supposed to be a topic at all, right? In the long run, once everybody understand that, a lot of people, they don't get comfortable because they think that people, the minority, they're more vocal, but once you make friends with them, try to make friends with gays, try to make friends with other people, a woman, a mother who's trying to balance their time between work and their kids, and understand them. You will know that we're all people, right? And in these settings, in the eyes of AI, we're all just different individual data points with different features. At the end of the day, we're all trying to make things work and make the world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you. And Annie, you'd like to also share your last?
Yes. To this audience, I think I would say, look at if you are a CDO or a CIO, look at your business and be clear about the intention of D&I. If you don't think it is important to your business, so don't do anything about it. But if it is, so look back at your product, services, and why you should have D&I. Make that clear intent. Have goals attached to that. That's the first thing. Immediate thing to do. So a little bit of introspection on your business and set goals. The next thing I would say is, don't worry about skilling or everything. Open those opportunities to women. Publicly open those opportunities, and we skill through communities. We go find ways to skill, but if I know the opportunities there. So that's just the two things that I would love to see the CDO community do.
Great, thank you, Annie. I think you raised a good point. It is attached to a business benefit. It's not just for the sake of bringing DEI in the team, but it does bring business benefit. And as leaders, it's our role to actually show that and review that, the importance of DEI. I'd like to thank again all the panelists for joining us today for this discussion. A really interesting topic, and really take a new, different perspective in looking at data analytics. I'll now pass the stage to Jonathan for closing remark for today. Thanks again, all the panelists.
Great, thanks for that, Sheila. All right, and thanks. A huge thank you to our panelists, Chloe, Dr. Lau, Annie, and Renee, and of course to you, Sheila. Really important and interesting discussion on diversity, equity, and inclusion in data analytics, and really Annie's overview presentation, which will be available to those later, Code Without Barriers, a very exciting initiative that we are going to feature on CDOTrends and digital workforce trends. Just looks like a very worthwhile initiative. Also, really liked the way Renee was able to push, kind of relate back to how it helped her build stronger teams, not necessarily the fastest team, but build stronger teams over time by looking at DEI and team building. Again, thanks for participating. And of course, a big thanks for the morning session from Diksha, from Pomelo, Felix from Denodo, and Atticom from from Zulig on establishing a complete view of data to optimize business, and wise words from Felix on not leaving data management up to the IT team without engaging other key teams with the enterprise if you really want to improve outcomes. I thought that really showed up in that discussion. Also on the other discussion from Suganti at Alteryx, Teng Hui from Hiredly, and Lee from Munich on end-to-end automation of analytics. Really great takeaway from Lee and Suganti on managing expectations for ML and automation as it regularly needs to be tweaked on a medium and long term automation journey if you're really going to get the results that you want. So you got to get the team ready for some results, but not necessarily the perfect result the first time through. I think that was very sane advice. Again, thanks very much for all of you for attending, and to our enabling partners, Alteryx, Denodo, and Microsoft, for bringing some very interesting data discussions to the fore today. A couple of final notes from CDOTrends, especially if you've enjoyed today's event. Please consider registering for a couple of these upcoming events. Our Digital Workforce Trends Hong Kong Summit coming up on April 28th. A lot of interesting onboarding and digital workforce ideas happening there, as well as our flagship. This is the first event we ever did, coming up on its 5th year, our Chief Digital and Data Officer Asia Summit, coming up on May 18th. It's actually going to be a live and a hybrid version. So it'll be live in Singapore, but it'll be broadcast digitally around ASEAN as well. If some of you want to register for that, just use the QR code. And finally, if you could take a moment just to answer our short survey, I think it was 5 or 6 questions. It will really help us to understand what your needs are, what we're doing well, what we need to improve on. And if you could just take another 45, 60 seconds, that would be great. Thank you all for joining today. Until the next time, stay safe and don't ask for the same data twice. Thanks very much.